News Radio 840 WHAS. Good Sunday morning. Bob Sokoler, the Louisville Real Estate Show, here with you until the top of the hour. Joining us for today's show, we've got Kevin Disler from Pitt and Frank Attorneys. You can reach Kev at 895-9900. You can pick the closing attorney that you want. Yes, and Kev is the guy, and his team at Pitt and Frank will do the job. Also, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service. They come in as a team, and they do a great job. Many of them veterans themselves, and you can reach Brad and his team at 844-411-TEAM. And my son, Greg, who does our marketing, photography, and so much more, it was part of my team. There's a theme today, my team. And so as a result, you can reach me anytime, get you on the market, or even just a consultation. It's free of charge, no obligation. 376-5483. Let's start this off with Brad. And this actually came from a caller who called me after a show several weeks ago. He says he lives with his girlfriend who wants to know what are the red flags in selling a home. For example, Bill is saying, does a leaking roof create a problem, a crack in the basement wall? Bill actually suggested that his girlfriend gets the major items fixed, but the girlfriend says, I don't need to. She'll get top dollar without fixing it. Greg and I will answer that in just a moment. First, let's talk with Brad about what are some of the key items.
Well, I think that he's asking some right questions. I'm not sure that I would want to enter into any sort of contract right now with major things like a roof leak or a cracked foundation. Keep in mind that anything that you can fix prior to listing, you're controlling how it's done and the cost at which it is being done. Any type of water coming into your house is a red flag always. Home inspectors are going to be hyper vigilant for any sort of moisture intrusion. We are looking for things like crack foundations, large cracks in basements. We're looking for those things that are unsafe in the home. We're also going to be looking at things, some clues like the HVAC system. When we pull the filter out, assuming there is a filter in it, we're going to be looking to see what the condition is. And that's going to give us a little bit of an idea of how the home has been maintained. So, good idea to get that HVAC system serviced before you put the house on the market. Anything that doesn't work, anything, that you've got light switches, you go into rooms and that switch doesn't work, or we've never been able to get that outlet to work. Those are things you want to take care of now. We often come into homes that have Post-it notes on them, very helpful Post-it notes guiding us to things like, this crack was here when we moved in, or this outlet has never worked since we've lived here. The challenge for that is that's not really, the home inspector is going to say, does it work or does it not work? So the editorial comments always add a little bit of levity to the inspection, but they're not particularly helpful. So get someone to come in, do an inspection before you put the house on the market. Control, how your equity is going to be used to make repairs. Give yourself some time to make those repairs versus waiting for the buyer to give the repair request list to you.
So, one thing I think that I would tell you that you probably look for and you didn't mention are smells. Because mold has a distinct odor.
That's true if you're sensitive to it. Like Bob, I don't have a big sensitivity to mold.
Oh,
so I go into homes all the time, and I test them. They come back as elevated for levels of mold, but I can't tell you that I picked up any odor. So you may be one of those.
Cats have odor.
Yeah, cats.
Listen, dogs have odor too, but I will tell you, there's been no more deal killers that I've seen in my career than cat odor.
Really? Cat's odor.
When it's unkept, it can turn off a large buyer pool.
Yeah. And any sort of water coming into the house is going to leave some sort of an odor, wet drywall, wet wood.
But I would much rather a musty old house than a musty old cat pee smelling house. You know what I mean?
And the combo of both of them is
not a good combo.
No, that's no words.
I have walked into homes I can smell mold when I get into the basement. So I'm wondering if you look for it. Okay. And then as for the other part of this question about just selling your home, getting full price for it, even though she hasn't fixed it, I would tell you not anymore. I mean, at one point earlier this year, there could be a point where people would come in, they've overlooked it.
If you're in St. Matthews in the Highlands and you have a dime a dozen home and it's just not, you can't recreate it, blah, blah, blah. It's where it was, like Bob was saying a couple months ago, absolutely just throw it on the market and see what happens. Even now, like, but to go to Brad, we always say at least safety and structural. Cosmetic stuff, easy peasy, but safety and structural, because if it comes back on you, it's a disclosure piece, it's liability. There's all sorts of things you don't want to have to deal with. They're good taken care of.
You're going to need to do some repairs, and a lot of sellers don't realize that. They're still thinking we're in the market we were 6 months or a year ago, but that's changed. It really has changed. Let's move over to Kevin. This one comes in from Georgie and her sister. Both live in their father's home. They're both over 18 years of age, and they're wondering if their father passes away, can both of them continue living in the house? So they're wondering, Kevin, specifically, should they get any documentation from their dad now to make sure that they can continue living if he passes away? They also want to know about inheritance tax, if we know anything about that. I'm not sure we have that knowledge, but what are some of the documents that kids should know about, not only if you're living in your parents' house, but if your parents pass away, what are the things that the kids are going to need to have or know about?
Sure. If in the situation, if their father passed away, and I'm assuming he's unmarried, but usually that you would either look to the will of the individual to determine who actually owns the property. May, like I said, in a will provision, he could put in that both of the daughters would own the property together. Or if the father did not have a will, then it would be called the law of intestate succession in Kentucky. So it very well may end up to them, but they're in a situation where they probably need to talk to their father. They didn't really go into, is he his age? Is he somewhat impaired? Is there some reason? But, first of all, everyone should get a will. But in their situation, if there's not a will in place, ultimately the property could be sold by the probate court, and they could be asked to vacate. So I think they need to sit down and have a nice long conversation with their father, see what, if anything, he's done with an estate plan. At the very least, and this is kind of a advice to everyone, get a will. You really need to have a will.
It's this question comes up from time to time, and I think it's so important because I know we have a lot of people who are listening to us who may not have thought about it, or maybe the kids are wondering about it, but in any case needs to be discussed, and it's not an easy topic to bring up. I understand that, which is why I'm going to tell you I've got broad shoulders, and I would say you could tell whether you're the parents or the kids. You can say, hey, I was listening to this radio show, and this guy Bob's brought this up, a topic about a will. They were talking about that we all need to talk about it and blame it on me. And then it takes off a lot of the onus about you bringing it up on your own. You were listening to a radio show, and that helps spur it.
So guys, we all have this on record when my sisters and I sit Bob down next weekend to have this conversation. We've already had the conversation.
Actually, I do as I speak. I have a will. I do.
I know. And I know who to call. I have a will. Yeah, I got a will when I think when I turned 30,
well,
I got
that's
a will.
why I say the percentage of people that have kids that don't have.
As soon as I had a kid, you
have to.
You have to. It's time to figure that out.
Who's going to be the guardian of your children?
Right.
Yeah. You want the court, or do you want you to?
Yeah, we were going on vacation, I think, and we were like, no, we need to do this. It's our first trip without the kids. Definitely. Who's going to fight for them? Who wants them in the
I will tell you right now that if something happens to me, one of the three of my kids need to take care of my dogs, JJ and Chloe, my German Shepherd. So I'm putting that on record.
If I could interject on that for just a moment, because that is something that scared the dickens out of me. I was doing a will for a client, and he wanted to give everything to his pet, his dog. He loved his dog. So I looked it up, and back then in Kentucky law, you could not give a bequest or set up a trust for a dog.
Really?
So you could not do it. Kentucky finally, with most other states, did, because my thought was, what happens to your dog that you love if you die?
Yeah.
Well, if no one takes your dog, guess what happens?
Oh, no, I don't want to
Wow.
Humane Society.
Well,
and then
to go back on that point, how do you identify the dog? How do you know it's the right dog? What if I say I'm taking care of the dog and I need the finances involved?
I'll just say when they pet trust, look it up. The Kentucky Humane Society is advising people to look into setting up provisions in your estate planning for a pet, which I think is
makes sense.
Genius. It does make perfect sense. Yeah.
All right, back over to Brad. Gertie lives in Old Louisville and has bought a house 6 months ago. Into the ownership, noticed an unusual smell. Speaking of smells, I kid you not, I did not plan this.
Yeah.
Smell in the basement, and then a couple of months later, water on the floors. She had crews come in, and sure enough, there was mold behind the walls in the basement. Is there anything a home inspector should have or could have done to determine that there was a problem behind the wood paneling in the basement?
Well, there's no way for the home inspector to know what's going on behind the walls. The home inspector will look for the signs of the moisture intrusion. Obviously, any water coming into the house can create a place where mold can grow and develop. Mold grows very quickly too. It could have been completely, neutral, nothing growing at the time she bought the house, but add the rain that we've had recently, and water comes in the house, and then the mold that was there activated. Now you can do mold testing. You can do air sampling. We do that hundreds of times a year, and that will give you an idea of the molds that are circulating throughout the house. So that is always an option. To do that testing, but it's not going to pinpoint where the mold might be. It's going to pinpoint the type of mold that you have and the type of material that mold grows on. We find food molds, in our testing all the time, just from hygiene concerns, problems in the house. We've found things like mold that you'd find on bread or oranges, or rotting fruit. This time of year we'll see pumpkin molds coming up here in a few months, where someone left a pumpkin in the basement that molded. So that's pretty common finding. But yeah, that would be the only way for the home inspector to know, is to actually do a mold air sample. And I don't know how many inspectors do that. Home team does, but that's not a standard part of a home inspection. That's an additional ancillary test that would have to be done.
Got it. By the way, folks, you may, if you're a regular listener of the show, you may have remember a couple of months ago, Brad and I talked about on the air about getting a carbon monoxide detector. At that time, we were going down to Sandals to a little vacation, and there had been problems. If you follow the news, you know what I'm talking about. So I had bought one through Amazon. Well, Brad, just so you know, when I got down there, they had them already installed in those rooms. So they're taking, The other thing, with all the rain we've been having, I was worried about water in the basement. And I went on Amazon. I found for like $40, there's two of these sensors. You put them on the floor, and they hook up also to Wi-Fi. I haven't got it yet, so I'll let you know once I put it. But it will notify you if there's water that gets on the floor, so you know there's a leak somewhere.
Well, Bob, a lot of the security companies, if you have a security system, you can put a water monitor on that. I have a system. Yeah, I have a standalone system in my house called a Roost. That it connects to the Wi-Fi and to a mobile app. It's not part of my security system, but my security carrier provides these things called water bugs that can be connected, and that will give you notice that you've got water coming in. Might even alerts with very high humidity that pops up in the areas where the Roost sensors are sitting. Yeah,
are they hardwired, or they have to be battery operated?
They're little battery operated. They're little pucks. I've had them in place for several years now.
See, you learn something new every day. Yeah. We're going to take a break. A quick note, we now have 6 ways to help you sell your home. If you want to talk about it, find out more about it, go to bobsellmyhome.com or sellmyhomebob.com. It'll take you to the website. You'll be able to fill out a form. It'll come out, no obligation. Here with us till the top of the hour, some dear folks, great people. Kevin Dissler, Pitt and Frank Attorneys, 895-9900. Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service, 844-411-TEAM. My son Greg does our marketing, photography, and so much more. And you can reach me, Bob Sokoler, anytime, 376-5483. We are back in a moment with what researchers say the 5 cities primed for deep home selling price cuts. Coming up in just a moment on News Radio 840 WHAS. News Radio 840 WHAS, Bob Sokoler, the Louisville Real Estate Show, here to the top of the hour. Continuing with us, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service, 844-411-TEAM is their direct number. Also, we've got Kevin Dissler, Pitt and Frank Attorneys. You can reach Kevin and his group at 895-9900. My son Greg, who does our marketing, photography, and so much more. And I'm here as well if you want to talk about listing or buying a home. You can reach me, Bob Sokoler, 376-5483. We've told you officially we're in a recession for the housing market. And now there are, according to some researchers, 5 cities that are primed for deep home selling price cuts. The story goes that researchers say the 5 cities are primed for the cuts: Boise, Idaho, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Phoenix, Sacramento, and some other cities where prices climbed during the COVID-19 pandemic as more people moved to those particular cities. By the way, Louisville and Southern Indiana are not named in the study, but prices here are coming down slightly. And so this is actually really good news for buyers if you've been squeezed out of a tight housing market over the past couple of years waiting for the opportunity to buy. You might finally get your chance. Some places already are looking more attractive to buyers than others. So some good news, at least to some level, for buyers. All right. Noah lives in Old Louisville, and the house next to hers was built in the early 1900s. The homes are very close together. In fact, she writes in, the house, she says, next to her is abnormally close. She seems to think it's like 4 feet away, and that the neighbor's house is missing gutters along the side of the house, and water dumps off of the roof of their house onto her house and next to her house, creating excessive draining problems that sometimes go into Gertie's basement or to Noah's basement. By the way, I'm just thinking, here we are talking about water, keeping track of what, and this, I had nothing planned here. This is just happening. To make matters worse, Noah's house is currently for sale, and the water in the basement problem is turning buyers off. So, Kevin, we'll start with you on from a legal aspect. Is there anything Noah can do to probably push the button and say, hey, neighbor, this is not cool. You got to do something?
Well, you'd have to look at the background of the situation, but it's Old Louisville. All those homes are historic. But have they done anything recently to artificially channel the water in another direction? Have they put in a new system? Yeah.
No, nothing here.
Yeah, in that, if you just buy a house and you've done nothing, and it's just a normal course of the houses are fairly close together.
Yeah.
Most of the water comes off the roof on one side that affects you, probably the same on the other side. I really don't think you'd have much of a claim. If someone goes out and I decide to rework all my gutter system, so I discharge all my water instead of 2 sides just on a Bob Sokoler's property out of spite, and which, hopefully your neighbor doesn't take that as a recommendation.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
But if you can show something that they've done something to change the normal course of the water that negatively affects you and your home, then this didn't seem like she was suggesting that there was a case. It's just the homes have a 0 lot line, and from back in the 1900s, and the water just happens to go in between both of them, and it's probably a common problem. So now I really don't think she would have much of a case.
How about, Brett, from your perspective? I suspect you're going to find that in an inspection.
Yeah, and I think the bigger problem is I thought that the question mentioned that the neighbor's gutter system wasn't working correctly. So water coming in between the houses is an issue, particularly as it's going into the basements, because yes, that will be found on inspection. And of course, the home inspector is going to say to them, you need to make sure that the water is moved away from the foundation. If the houses are that close together, simple grading is not going to help the situation. I mean, it'd almost be to the point of installing something like a French drain next to the house in order to move the water away, which is really expensive. So I don't know. I mean, is this the case where you're looking at your neighbor's gutter, this then draining right up next to your house? Is that the apple pie diplomacy, Kevin?
Well, I think in that case, what you talked about, I mean, I remember back in my days of owning single family rentals, that the city would come by and notate when my gutters were clogged, and neighbor would turn you in. So that might be, like you mentioned, that may be a way to do it, is you talk to the city inspector and see if they can come out and flag it.
Hey, Greg, Greg's in Norton Commons, and I know some of the homes are pretty close. So there's a setback, obviously, from the property line.
Very, very minuscule setback, depending on where you are, but they're considered 0 lot lines. Yeah.
Have you seen any problems with water penetrating or coming across from somebody else's yard for lack of a decent sized gutter or too much water coming down?
Not personally. I mean, just anecdotally, when I built this house, we had to figure out a better solution for drainage because of the way both lines were graded. And a lot of times in Norton Commons, they ease over your inactive side to your neighbor. So you take on responsibility of that, but for the most part, in these lots, if they're graded properly, you put a French drain in down the middle of the line. Everything's sloping to the middle. If you need to get graded, you get it graded. But nothing crazy. But I'd be curious, like, say the easement's in place. I have a flood on my side of the property. If it causes damage to my neighbor who eased me over to that, am I responsible to, one, obviously have had that fixed because it's eased over to me, or am I responsible for any of the damages? I mean, I don't know if I caused it, but
there are some old cases where, again, if you do take some affirmative action on your property, change the grading of your property to affect your neighbor adversely, there are cases out there that says they have a right to go after you for that. But just the natural slope of a property where you really haven't actively done anything, and like Norton Commons, well engineered.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're well engineered, but a lot of people do, the artificial turf grass doesn't grow between the homes. You come out, but a lot of times those systems that are being put in with drainage systems, rock, extra gravel, all those sorts of things, and it's also being graded properly at the time of installation. So you would assume that would be.
All right, well, let's move on. Brad, this question is representative of a number of questions that we get from our listeners on a regular basis, and I think it's important to address it. And folks, this may or may not be you. Ramsey writes in that she lives in a home that was built 5 years ago, and some of her windows are starting to fog, and she's tried cleaning both the inside and the outside without any luck. And she's asking, why are they foggy? So explain what's going on there to everybody.
What's happening there is the thermal seals between the panes of glass have ruptured or broken the seal, as they say. And what happens there is the gas escapes, and really you no longer have the insulation factor that was originally there, and that's where you're getting the fogging that comes in. Those systems can be repaired. There's a few local contractors in Louisville who do that type of work. You can just probably Google Louisville, thermal window repair. You'll probably find them out there. They can effectively replace those seals. It is something that you need to be aware of, because you will note that you'll start having condensation on the inside of your windows, particularly as we get into the wintertime. And if you've got wooden windows, that can start creating wood rot around the windows and will decay the windows pretty rapidly until the condensation is actually removed. So it's not something to ignore. I will tell you, sometimes when we inspect homes, it's difficult to tell the difference between dirty glass and insulations that's missing. But as a homeowner, if you have condensation on the inside of your windows during particularly during the wintertime, that the thermal seals are not working there.
And interesting, I know there was a company in Cincinnati that used to do those repairs, but they were not very successful. Would you say, because they have to drill a hole, they have to clean the window, then they have to suck out whatever's there and plug it, or replace it with some sort of gas, right?
Yeah, correct. And I mean, the companies that I'm familiar with in Louisville that have done it seem to be doing it very successfully and have done it for a lot of years. So we've had clients that have used them successfully. I personally haven't, but I've heard from clients that, whatever work they do, because yes, they drill a hole and patch it and re-gas it, but it seems to be an effective repair system.
And I would suspect a lot cheaper than putting a whole new window in, which could be crazy. Yeah. All right, we move over to Kevin. This may end up being the last question, and it comes from Nadia, who lives in an apartment in Louisville and recently signed a lease that advertised the apartment as having a private roof deck. That posting later, when she went and signed the deal and went into the apartment, went up as far as included photos of the roof deck that was furnished with patio furniture. And now the landlord is telling her that she's not allowed on the roof of the apartment. And she's wondering, does she have a reason to sue the owners of the apartment complex for saying it was a roof deck? She doesn't have access to it. And is there a process that she should be following? And other apartment renters who maybe have a problem with their landlord over one thing or another, what would the suggestion be for a path for them?
That, again, the questions come in, they don't have all the background facts.
Yeah,
like,
right.
What exactly happened? Was there some type of a danger up there, or some type of a change of circumstance? But usually, I mean, to her, I'm assuming that she rented out, part of the value of her monthly rent was the use of this.
Mhm.
Now she's been denied the use of it. So it's diminished the value of the rental unit. So technically she could make a claim that, from her standpoint, if she was paying 1,500 rent, perhaps her rent should be 13.5 because she's lost the value to her of the use of that deck, which did have some value to it. But it's one of those things that, well, what happened? Was it real unsafe because some type of casualty? So, if she wanted to pursue it, I think the best thing is to sit and talk to people and at least write to them, give them a couple emails, and just suggest that, one of the reasons that she signed the lease was because of that. It's not available. And she thought a good thing to knock a couple $100 off the rent. See if that works.
Got it. By the way, if you are thinking of selling your home, we have a free 150 tip document. It's a little magazine that gives you some great features, information about selling your home faster and for more money. If you'd like a copy of it, it's again free obligation, no obligation. Bob at WeSellLouisville.com, and put in the email line, the subject line, that you want the home tips, and I will send it right back out to you. And by the way, we also have, and we received a couple of comments on this one, our home team inspection service has an inspection document. It's a pamphlet on what to expect during an inspection. And if you want that same thing, put inspection in the subject line, send me an email, Bob at WeSellLouisville.com. All right. We are out of time. My thanks to our friends Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service, 7 years in a row now, #1 in the country for Home Team. And you can reach Brad and his people at 844-411-TEAM. Also, Kevin Disler, Pitt and Frank Attorneys, and you can reach Kevin and his group at 895-9900. My son Greg, who does our marketing, photography, and so much more. Thank you all for being here. And you can reach me, Bob Sokoler, on my cell phone anytime, 376-5483. We are out of time. See you next Sunday on News Radio 840 WHAS.